The problem with it is it becomes this good versus evil, where if I'm on the left, then everything the right does is evil and bad. If I'm on the right, everything does. And with that framework, I don't ever look at myself and actually critique myself.
Welcome to A Theology of Hustle. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and follow me at Theology of Hustle on Instagram. Now, let's get to work. Justin Giboney, welcome back to Theology of Hustle. It's good to see you again, man.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I love it. So I know you've been here before, but it's been 5 years. I looked it up. It was the summer of 2020. So we were in some wild times back then for sure.
Right.
Can you give us just a kind of quick bio?
Sure. Justin Giboney. I'm an attorney, an ordained minister, and a political strategist. I'm also the president of the AND campaign, which is a Christian civic organization that's trying to help Christians raise civic literacy and engage politics and culture in a more faithful way. I'm married, have 3 sons, live in Atlanta, Georgia, and all that good stuff.
I love it. That's awesome. Is the ordained minister a new-ish thing, or were you an ordained minister when we talked last time?
Probably happened right after we spoke. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's awesome. So are you doing any sort of church work in that capacity these days?
I mean, Bible study, stuff like that. I'm not a senior pastor. Or
okay.
Like
okay. Yeah, I gotcha. I can't ever kick the ministry thing, so I'm always doing something. I assume probably
that's a good thing.
It's similar. Yeah. I love it. Awesome. Okay. So last time that I had you on, it was to talk about your book, Compassion and Conviction. And at that time, I think AIM campaign was, earlier in its phase. Can you talk to me a little bit about what the AIM campaign is doing now? What y'all got going on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're still going all over the country, speaking at churches, colleges, conventions, things of that nature about how Christians should engage politics. And a lot of that really revolves around our framework, which is the compassion and conviction framework, that when we look at an issue, we shouldn't look at an issue just as a progressive or a conservative. We should look at an issue from the compassion and conviction of Jesus Christ, right? What does the Bible say doctrinally about certain issues? And then how does love, what role does love play into that? And so we're still doing a lot of that. We've been around for a while, but there's a lot of space and a lot of people who still haven't heard what we had to say. So we're still spreading around. Also, we have something, one of our big things is bringing the church together across racial, ideological, and partisan lines. And so one of the ways we're trying to do that here in Atlanta, and hopefully it'll spread soon, is through what we're calling Lit City, which is a literacy initiative. We think childhood literacy is an issue that no matter what party you're in, it's something that you should care about. And so we're trying to bring Christians together around that, build relationships, and do the work together. And we think in building those relationships, the church can come together in a better way.
No, man, I love that. I'll have to check that out. That's good stuff. I love the heart behind it, and what y'all are doing. We talked about all these themes. I just listened to our last interview, so we talked about all these themes last time. I love to hear that. I mean, really, and what you talked about last time, I was talking about sort of education in general. How would one go about educating themselves politically? And your answer at that time was institutions. And you feel like AND campaign is one of those sort of like institutions people can turn to politically, right?
Yeah, we're a growing institution. We provide resources and training to help Christians engage in a better way. And politics in general, civics in general, is not something that you do as an individual. And so we're trying to teach people to do that as a group, as a body.
Okay. I love that. It's good stuff. Okay. So one thing I was thinking of as I was listening to the old episode and all that stuff. So, I mean, you're a trained attorney. That's what you were doing. And I know you have a younger family. We're sort of in that same general age range, high school, middle schoolers, elementary. And I was just thinking about, I guess, a little more practically about, being an attorney and, having a young family and deciding, instead of kind of joining big law or a boutique firm or something, you decided to start a institution, and go after the AIM campaign. Can you talk a little bit just about the story and some of the thinking and how God ordered those steps for you?
Yeah. So before the AND campaign, I was working for the mayor of Atlanta. So I worked in the law department, but I would also take leaves of absence to run campaigns. So, I was kind of a campaign professional, political strategist. And it just became very clear to me based on what was going on in the public square that I was being called not to use my expertise and experience for a political party, but for the kingdom, to help Christians engage in a better way and to help Christians work with others and gain influence to do good. And so that process, I tell people, because people are like, man, that's, it's really brave and all that. And I was like, yeah, not really, because I didn't feel like I had a choice, right? Like God made it really clear that's what I was supposed to do, and it was so clear. And I'm thankful for that type of clarity of vision. It was so clear what I was supposed to do that I just kind of had to follow it, and He made a way. I mean, it was one of those situations where nobody's really heard of anything like that before. A Christian civic organization. I mean, what is
Right.
that?
Right.
And so for a long time, people were like, I didn't even like trying to explain it because people had no idea what it was, and they thought it was just, oh, so you're unemployed and you just right, you're just coming up with something to say you do. I mean, that's how people treated it.
Yeah.
I knew it was bigger than that, and God just put the pieces together.
Yeah. That's awesome. And what, I don't know, what about just like practically like making that decision? I mean, what was that process like knowing that you're going from somewhere, I mean, you can make lot of money, like legit,
Mhm.
I mean, there's a sacrifice to all of that, I would
Yeah.
imagine. Like, how did that thinking go for you, I guess?
Well, I mean, it didn't come without planning, right? So I wanted to make sure that I had identified Christian donors who were interested in what we were
Right.
doing, and that was a process over, over a couple years. I want to make sure that I actually had a framework and knew what I was going to be doing. So I had started speaking and doing and writing even before I had jumped out. But yeah, it was just prayer and planning to the extent that I could, but my planning doesn't really explain, how the AND campaign has grown and what we've become. That was more God's doing for sure.
God, yeah. I find that so fascinating. The entrepreneurialism of it, I mean, it's, we, I think we're a country that values that sort of thing in general, I would say. But many people don't think about the sacrifices that it takes to jump out
Mhm.
and do something like that. And, um, God calls us for sure, what I mean? But stepping out into that call is a completely different thing because things get real practical real fast, I guess. And I love that story of you kind of, shifting to that, to following God's call into something that's so obviously, he has ordained. And I'm sure there's been lots of bumps, and there's been maybe questions of like, did I hear that? Did I hear that
Mhm.
correctly? At times. And
And I'll be honest, I mean, there's definitely been bumps. It's certainly not easy. I don't think I've ever questioned whether God called me to this particular thing. And again, that's been the blessing of it. I feel that that's been clear. Now, how you go about it, sometimes you have to be prayerful about and discerning.
yeah, I'm sure stepping into something like that too. I mean, you're stepping into the fray, right? I mean, probably one of the most contentious areas of modern American life, into the political sphere, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you need a strong call to keep going on something like that.
Sure.
Good, it's good. Okay, so the reason I had you on, and I saw your forthcoming book now. Don't let nobody turn you around. And so this book's releasing in November. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
Okay. That's awesome. I just read it. Justin, I really enjoyed this book. I have to say. It's very good. Can you give us kind of the outline? Like, what prompted you writing this book?
Really, the culture war and in what it has wrought in America. Just seeing people on the left and the right, Christians on the left and the right, miss a true application of the gospel to the public square because of ideology and because of this back and forth culture war. On one side, I talk about how I think conservatives are just in many ways missing the compassion that they need to have. Um, and then when we talk about progressives, I think it's just a loss of moral knowledge and wisdom on
Mm,
a whole number of issues. And so I want to say, how do we correct that? And the beauty of it is the correction for that isn't just a theory. I think we have proof of concept, because I think when you look at the Black church's historic public witness, you don't see perfection, but you see something that's very different than conservatism and progressivism. You see something that's actually a correction of that. You see a group of people who looked at both of those two throughout the years and said, nah, I think there's a better way. And that's important to me, because so many people, when they approach the public square, they think it's conservatism or progressivism. You got to choose one and then you just go all in. But right sitting in our faces throughout this history, we've had something that shows us a different way. And so I think the book really helps Christians see it's not really just to kind of, glorify or exalt the Black church tradition. It's really saying, hey, here's an example of a better way to go about it. Imperfect, but instructive.
Yeah. I love that about it, because it's right. It's not this like everything's rosy and like, the Black church has always done it right. There was a real understanding of kind of the history there. This book to me felt very personal. Would you agree? Like, it just felt like you were writing very personally in this book.
Oh yeah, it's far more personal than it's just a different kind of book than Compassion
Yeah.
and Conviction than my last one. This one, for one, it centers my maternal grandmother, right?
Yeah.
Her story is a big part of the book, and so that was very personal. And I poured a lot into that in that way. So yeah, you're right. If that's what you perceived, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
This was a much harder book to write than the first one. And this is my second, not fourth. This was a much harder one to write than Compassion and Conviction.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It was very emotive. I mean, I don't know. I sense your emotions as you walk through that. Your deep love for your grandmother, but also the tradition of the civil rights movement, and Fannie Lou Hamer, who you talk about, several times. Can you maybe just introduce us to Willie Fay and why you decided to center the book on her life?
Yeah, Willie Fay again is my maternal grandmother, and I think her story is really the story of what I call the civil rights generation, right? She's, born in Mississippi, moves up through the Great Migration to Illinois, goes through all the civil rights, whether it be in schools and how it affected her, whether she went to school or not, how it affected her family as far as resources. All that stuff is kind of she becomes kind of a condensed symbol of that whole generation. And it just fit. It just came to me and it fit. I said, wow, this is personal. I know the people who know the stories. Let's put this story out there as part of that larger narrative.
Yeah. Agreed. And you also center it in some ways on Mahalia Jackson, who's a gospel singer, right? Can you tell us just a little bit about her and why you bring her into this as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so when I talk, a lot of it is set around the civil rights generation. My grandmother represented kind of the a little younger part of that generation. Mahalia Jackson was the older part of it. But again, her story was so beautiful, and she brought in. So Mahalia Jackson was my grandmother's favorite singer, right? So that was one of the connections. Yeah. She, grows up in Louisiana, moves to Chicago, very very similar story. But she was such in the middle of the music, and the music was a central part of the civil rights movement, of the Black church's social action tradition, that it just spoke to what that movement was really about. And she was, a center of that and almost the voice of what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And even your choice to, I noticed throughout the book, as opposed to like saying the civil rights generation, you always referred to it as Willie Fay and Mahalia Jackson's generation. I really appreciated that, because it connected it with people, right? It's easy to say the civil rights generation and kind of, it's this amorphous sort of group, but you seem to always just bring it back to people. And I assume that was very intentional on your part there.
Yeah, it was intentional. I mean, it's one of those things. As you write it, it comes to you. It made a lot of sense, and it connected people to something real. Again, I think the benefit of this book is I'm not just saying, "Hey, it could be this. This could happen." This no. Here's what actually happened, and it happened to people who are facing tougher times than you're facing right now, and they still maintain those convictions. So we know that it can be done. The question is whether Christians have the will to do it the right and faithful way.
Yeah. Yeah, and not only just personal stories, but I mean, you really centered it on Black women
Mm,
throughout the book, and I
yeah,
think it's easy to look at these, the men of the civil rights movement. There's a lot of talk about the men who sort of pushed the civil rights forward. There's less talk about the women who were instrumental in doing all of these stuff, and I loved
yeah,
hearing the stories of these women and how strong that they were, and how they led not only their families and congregations, but they were leaders of the civil rights movement as well.
yeah. I mean, anybody who's close to the civil rights movement, who was close to the civil rights movement, knew that women were like the motor of that, of all that. I mean, they might not have been on the stages
Yeah.
often, but without them, there's no civil rights movement. Period.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciated that. And it made it feel so real. Um, I feel like so often with the civil rights movement, especially I'm going to speak for white people here. The white people get this sense that that was like so long ago in ancient history. You know what I mean? And like, oh, we're kind of done with all that. I'm
Yeah,
sure, you know. And you're talking about your grandmother, here, and I talked. My parents, were in segregated schools in high school, and you're just like, this is not a long time ago. Like, let's put this into some context here. And I
yeah,
think the stories of like actual people does that over and over again. This is not ancient history, folks.
right.
This is our legacy, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're naming it. That's a major part of it. To say no, we're connected to this. This is not ancient history that we have to, dig through the dirt and all that stuff to find. No, there's still people on this earth who went through this, who was very real to them, and we need to recognize that because it makes it even more clear that there's things that linger, or even more than just linger, but are still present with us in a real way today.
Yeah, I'm a pastor now at a diverse church here in the DFW area, and there's people in our congregation that went to segregated schools, and
Yep.
I'm talking. These are people I work with, at the church, and I feel like it's very easy not being connected to that history for the white community to forget that that's like that's a tangible thing. So.
Yeah, no, that's real.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about the Black church in America and the distinctives of the Black church. Like, how are we even kind of defining and talking about the Black American church?
Yes, I use a pretty broad definition. It's denominations and even congregations that were majority Black, that were
Mhm.
primarily Black. That's
Yeah.
the definition that I use, and I got that definition from other authors who had used the same. But I think there are a few things that kind of mark that tradition. One of them is the um, deliberately keeping the spiritual and the political together,
Yeah.
right? This is why you go into the public square, you go to marches or whatever, and you sing spirituals,
Yeah.
because these spirituals have principles that you need in those moments, right? So you sing the spirits. It's not just something they did for fun because they were bored. They did it because they needed those principles to behave in a way that was glorifying God when dealing with those very serious issues and when being threatened and having their lives threatened. So whether it was the courage, whether it was the forgiving others or all that, these are things that they took with them every step of the way, and this is why they were able to be such a model for how that should go. Something else, I think it was distinctively not conservative or progressive. And that's one of the big things I wanted to point out. I think progressives sometimes try to co opt the civil rights movement. But if you look at the ethos, if you look at the core of the movement, these were people who believed in the authority of Scripture. These were people who did this because they believed God told them to do it, which is very different than your 1970s progressive, sexual revolution, all of that. Like, they try to put those together today, but that was not a progressive, secular progressive movement. It also wasn't conservative. It also pushed back against what conservatives and conservative churches were doing at that time or not doing, right?
Yeah.
It was calling them out to say, God calls us to get engaged with this, and you not doing it is wrong. So I think those are two of the distinctives that really really help us understand what that tradition was about.
Yeah, agreed. Since you brought it up, I pulled this quote for later on here, but I think this is really appropriate for what you were just talking about. You say the attempts to make blackness and secular progressivism natural companions is one of the most dishonest narratives produced by the culture wars. I found that really fascinating because the left in our country, the political left, tends to just sort of, just assume that this Black American history is leftist, is kind of following everything that they want to do. Even when their like morality shifts, they just kind of co-opt the Black church and the movement. And I appreciated you pointing that out. That was a revelation for me, I guess. I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, it's very intellectually dishonest. Most Black Christians, especially at that time, the great majority of Black Christians were socially conservative, even if that was expressed differently than white evangelicals at the time.
Yeah.
You have somebody like Fred Shuttlesworth who's getting pastors to shut down these juke joints. At the same time, he's fighting for voter rights.
Yeah. Yeah, so they hold both things. There's this interesting bit of history you get into, and I think it's fascinating. Most Americans don't understand the history of kind of the white Protestant church in America, which kind of has a great schism there in the 10s and 20s between the fundamentalist and the modernist, right? And there's this split off that happens there. Can you talk a little bit about that and how the trajectories of the white Protestant church kind of affect us today?
Yeah, so there was kind of this great divide. At one point, you see one part of the church become a lot more secular and liberal. And so there you see it in churches, you see it in Christian universities like Princeton and all that, where there's this major split. And now this is where the culture war kind of really starts. You have the conservatives on one side and the liberals on the other side. What people don't realize is the Black church saw that. The Black church observed it and said, I don't want to go either way. And this was not something that just kind of like happened and it wasn't spoken. It was spoken. Like, no, we don't think either of these are right. In one, we lose our souls if we go to the left, right? If we go to the right, we lose our bodies.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Because there's just not that respect. So that people miss that. I mean, again, in academia, there has been such what I would call, again, an intellectually dishonest connecting of progressivism and the Black traditions.
Yeah.
That people just don't know these facts. And I think that is very clearly revealed in the book. And I hope it's helpful to people that are struggling with that. Because there are a lot of, and the reason why it matters to me is there are a lot of Christians who want to do justice and see how important justice is, but they can't seem to connect the justice and the authority of Scripture, the justice and the orthodoxy. And part of what this book is saying, is those two things go together. If you do not have the authority of Scripture, you do not have a foundation to go tell somebody else that they have to do justice.
Yeah.
That comes from some authority. And it can't just be you, because if it's just you, they don't have to listen. But if it comes from an authority above all of us, then they do have to listen. And even if they don't like it, they have to do it. That's what authority means, right? That's what absolute truth means. And so it doesn't make sense for people on the left to run away from absolute truth, but then demand that somebody do justice.
Yep.
You can't do both. It's one or the other.
Yeah, and it's just wild how much that history, the white Protestant history, still just affects us today. Like you can still see it in the culture wars today, like you said. It's not one for one where the fundamentalists are all sort of on the right and progressives all on the left. But I mean, you can see sort of this mainline church tradition splintering off into the political left, and then more fundamentalist Christians kind of staying on the political right. And it's like this doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not like this just
there's a history
popped up. Yeah.
And I think what you see in that history is the ones that went to the right become about Christendom, right? And you see this politics of self-interest and we're persecuted, we've got to protect ourselves, which I get, but which falls well short of the gospel. And on the left, you see what I see even today is a group of Christians who are trying to fit Christianity into the progressive framework, and whatever doesn't fit, they throw out. A group of Christians who I think have done themselves a major disservice because they follow progressivism so much that they don't have their own authentic voice anymore. And it's disappointing.
It is disappointing. And it's all tribalism, right? In order to kind of fit in with my group, I've got to make these compromises, right? And it happens on both sides. In order to kind of fit into the political right, I've got to make certain moral compromises sometimes, or depending on the season, I've got to make these, I've got to cross. These political alignments are constantly asking us to cross these boundaries that we never said we would cross. And in order to step more into their fundamentalism, and in order to be sort of like on side, I have to cross more and more of these lines I said I would never cross, and thereby sort of like leaving behind the stuff that made us who we are.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know if you caught it or not, but again, this book isn't just a critique of the white church.
Yes,
it's actually a critique of the Black church today. It's a challenge to the Black church today to say, here's what you were.
Mm-hmm.
What are you, where are you going to go now?
Yeah.
Right. And so all that is in there.
Yeah. I appreciate that caveat and you talking about that. I tended to read it more from my perspective, which is kind of how things go. So
and there's a lot of that in there, right? Yeah. Because that's the majority. That's, so you're not wrong for that. I want to emphasize there's something else. They're saying, well, in as much as the Black church is going away from that tradition, there needs to be a correction as well.
Yeah, and I love that. Even, I mean, you devote specific chapters even to critiquing conservatism and progressivism. You give wholehearted critiques kind of down the middle, and it's not a whataboutism. My side's bad, but what about this other side? It's like we stand in the middle. So can we talk a little bit just about the culture war and like how should a Christian, what should our stance be towards this culture war in which we are a part right now?
Yeah, so the culture war in general, James Davison Hunter would say that it's a battle for kind of the soul of America, right? Yeah. For the ideals of America. Is America about this progressive ideal, individual expression, all this stuff, or is it about this conservative ideal? That's a fair conversation. The problem with it is it becomes this good versus evil, where if I'm on the left, then everything the right does is evil and bad. If I'm on the right, everything does. And with that framework, I don't ever look at myself and actually critique myself. If they're this bad, then everything they do is wrong. And then everything I do is at least acceptable because based on the whataboutism, well, they're worse. So you can't really, I had somebody message me the other day and say, I mean, as bad as the right is, how can you ever, critique the left? I'm like, dude, Jesus was under a Roman occupation.
Yep.
he still talked about the Sadducees and the Pharisees. You know,
Yeah,
like
very much.
Christians, that is a very much a culture war point of view. It's not a Christian point of view. If something's wrong, I'm going to call it wrong. Now, I will try to avoid false equivalence. But that's really what the culture war has become. Issue and why it hurts us is because the issues we need to get to, we can't get to because of how it's handled. So my book doesn't say that these culture war issues don't matter. It does matter what my children are taught in schools. It does matter whether, there's transgenderism or, whether that's being taught is right or all these other things. Those things matter and they're worth debating, right? It's how we do it. Do we do it in this opposition-centered way, which I talk about that in the book, or do we engage others with an understanding that they're made in the image of God and understanding that we are not flawless, that we are sinful too? If we do that, there begins to have this dignity in them, error in us, and we begin to have a little bit more humility in how we go about it. There's none of that in the culture war. But if you look at the Black tradition, to be under that level of oppression in the 60s, 50s, and before that, and to still recognize that you can go wrong. I mean, that's God, right? That's not flesh and blood that gives you the ability to say, yeah, they're lynching us, but I can still look at myself and say, I can do something better.
Yeah. Yes. I love that you brought it back to that. There's a quote that you give of Fannie Lou Hamer, and I don't think I pulled it, but she had endured such hardships for just trying to get people to vote. She was beaten up in prison, and I don't know if you have it off the top of your head, but she talks about how, like, just basically, I will not hate these people because they are sick, right? These cops that beat me up, they're sick.
Yeah, she was asked what she thought about the officer that had her beat up.
Yes.
And she says, almost like, I feel sorry for him because he's sick.
Right. We need so much more of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know what else to say about it. That is the Christian response, bar none, right? I mean, there's no other way about it. And how much of this, Justin, is just that, like, we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what power even really is in our America. Is that like a root of a lot of this problem that we have going on?
It is a root. I also think part of it is we want vengeance. We don't want redemption. Her answer, as beautiful as it was, was an easy answer for somebody who wants redemption.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
If I want my enemies to be redeemed, then I don't look at them like, man, how can I destroy you? How can I get rid of you? I look at them, how can I persuade you to do the right thing? And if you don't do it, what brokenness caused you not to do it?
Yeah. Man. Yes, that is good. I just kind of want to sit in that for a second. That is such a great point of where we're at. Like, how did we get it so twisted though? And this, you talk about, I'm going to use your terminology, Willie Faye and Mahalia Jackson's generation, they were who they were because of their experiences. And, those experiences could have driven them to hate so easily. Right. And they didn't let hate kind of consume them. And, we're in a position where we don't have, like, most modern Americans, we live a pretty fluid life. Things are definitely not perfect, but we so quickly go to hate, and vengeance. And I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's all about the ethos, right? Like, if you are in a culture war ethos, that's what you're taught. That's what tribalism does to you. If you let the other side get any advantage, you're killing us. How could you do that?
Yeah.
And if you think of it that way, we all can slip into it. But again, the Bible very clearly pushes us against that. And it is heartbreaking that so many Christians just can't see it, because the moment, every moment is catastrophic. Everything is going to end if those other people get in control. Not noticing that the culture war is really just a series of one group getting in power and overreaching and not having any discipline with what they do. And it just goes in a cycle over and over again.
Yeah. And it's not like either of these groups has like basic not morality. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say it's not like there's a firm flag planted and this is who we are and who we will always be, a firm morality. Like many of these parties are just shifting to whatever like gets them the most power. I don't know how people can't see this, and they're just
you
keeping
don't
you
see
on
it
side.
when you're focused not on self-examination but on what the other side's doing. Your side can get away with murder. I mean, because you're not focused on that. You're focused on beating them, and whatever it takes to beat them becomes necessary and justified.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. What you have a quote in here I want to share as well. The lack of color in the history of the culture war is glaring.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, again, the culture war has always really been between white conservatives and white progressives. Nobody else has really, I mean, you have people who are kind of supposed representatives here and there, but no other tradition like the Black church tradition has really had a chance to speak into it, because it's just been these two. They have more resources, there's more people, and they've kind of controlled the discourse, and nobody has spoken into that. And again, that's why you see those two groups kind of placing others and using others as pawns for this game that they're playing against each other, right? And Black people have certainly been used as pawns in that way. The Black church has certainly been kind of like exploited and used, but not really ever having a clear say in this is how it should look and this is how it should go. And the sad part is, even some people now from the Black church, after you go into academia or whatever, you end up buying into the lie that we were actually part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction there. I appreciate that. Even the patriotism you talk about, and just so much of the civil rights movement got accused of being unpatriotic. They got accused of being communists, and so much of like what Dr. King was doing was just asking, he called the promissory note of the Declaration of Independence, equal rights. And so much of that civil rights movement was more patriotic than the things going on around it.
Yeah, there are a few things that were more patriotic than calling out the country to live based on its ideals. I mean, that's what it's about. And even this new conversation with Trump and the Smithsonian and all that, this isn't a good representation of America. Yes, it is.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'll nerd out for just like a half second. I've been listening to some podcasts, and I was just listening to a legal podcast interviewing Professor Akil Amar. So he interprets the Constitution based on the text as a liberal, but what he adds to it is the Bill of Rights, specifically the Reconstruction Amendments and the Declaration of Independence, and this conservative legal construction. So much of that's left off, the Declaration of Independence and these, this promissory note that Dr. King talked about, that this was aspirational. This is what the country was called to be from the beginning, right? And it wasn't perfect, but we keep working to get to those aspirational goals. And I find that fascinating, that like, what are we calling this country to be exactly? Is it pushing back towards what we originally, had intended to be, or is this something completely different?
Yeah, and that's Frederick Douglass's argument, right? Too. Frederick Douglass even goes to other abolitionists and says, I'm not going to destroy this document. This is what gives us the mechanism to change things. This is good.
Yeah.
And that's such a moment too. Because when I read the quote, when I first read the quote where he said, Frederick Douglass, this is, I'll work with anybody to do good and nobody to do bad. I didn't know he was talking to other abolitionists. Like today, we don't check our tribe like that. He was a former slave. He knew how serious what they were doing, how the gravity of the situation.
Yeah.
And he still goes to these people he's working with and says, no, I'm going to critique you. I'm going to tell you when you're wrong. If he can do that concerning abolition, why in the world can't a conservative or progressive Christian do that same thing right now? But we feel like you cannot check your own side because you give the other side an advantage. That's just not faithful, and it's not historically accurate.
Yeah. And it's so much of what the Black church in general has done throughout time, right? They've been on, you know, never really on side per se, always fighting for their rights, like kind of wherever they were at, throughout history. And the Black church actually probably, or I'll say this as a question: did the Black church, was it just that they built muscles to do that sort of thing? Is that what makes the Black church good at that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think again, all of this, none of this was done with perfection. But I do think, as King said, there's something redemptive about suffering if you choose to do it well.
Mm.
And in their suffering, once they chose to be faithful, yes, you start to build the muscles that show you that this can happen in the right way. And it's a product of faith, really, right? There's no rational, there's no real rational explanation. If you go to somebody and try to debate it, you might lose, actually, right?
Yeah.
But it's a matter of faith. Responding in the way they did was a matter of faith. It was believing that this moment is important. People are suffering. It needs to change, but it's not ultimate. And when you believe that, that can change your whole. It does change your whole perspective, right?
Yeah. Just the Holy Spirit, man. God, that's what I always keep coming back to. There's this story of Dr. King, and I think he was at a meeting, and he was preaching at a church, and a white man, while he's preaching, comes up and starts beating him on stage. And Dr. King, he puts his hands to his side, and he calls off, like, there, this is one white man in a giant group of civil rights activists, right? He puts his hands to his side, and he calls off everybody. He has them stop and doesn't allow them to kind of take vengeance on this white man who was literally beating him with his hands. And Dr. King takes him back to the back, and he talks to this man and tries to convince this guy to stay and listen to the rest of his talk, and I don't know what to say about that, except that like only the Holy Spirit could convince somebody to do that, because that gets my ire up. You know what I mean? That gets me like riled up and ready to fight. And I wish so many other people understood this Christian witness of the civil rights movement. So,
yeah, that's what the book's for. Hopefully it draws people closer to what that group, what Willie Faye and Mahaلیa's generation was trying to accomplish.
Amen. I love it. It is a read that has so much history, but it's not cumbersome. It's a really pleasant read and very emotive. And I think, like, people should be pre-ordering it, like, as we speak, open up a new tab, pre-order it. So I love it. I do have one thought for you that I want to throw out that I've been thinking about quite a bit. And I just want to kind of maybe get your reaction to it. So I think there's a lot of white evangelicals, maybe ex-evangelicals, whatever we want to say right now. I don't know what's going on with the evangelical label or whatever. There's a lot of white evangelicals, even though, 80% voting for, Trump in the most recent election. There's a lot of white evangelicals that feel politically homeless, right? Feel like that neither side really represents them. I know this is true of the Black church too. I'm just speaking for white folks right now, that are really frustrated by what the country is going through and what's happening right now in our culture. And I get that. I'm very much in that camp. And I think there's a very clear answer to this question. And I don't know why I don't know why it's not a huge movement. And the answer to this question, this struggle to me, is Black church leadership. Being under the leadership of pastors who are Black seems like a very simple solution to like a new way forward for many white evangelicals or ex-evangelicals. And I don't see a huge movement towards that sort of thing. And I know you're more out in the world. You do a lot more of this sort of work. Am I just missing it? Or is this like, why is this not a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. It historically has been hard for white evangelicals to serve under Black leadership. That's just a fact, and that's something that we need to work on. Um, but I'll also say that every Black church is not faithful, right? So it depends on the particular leader. There are a lot of folks I wouldn't send people to, and then there are a lot of great Orthodox, caring, just wonderfully pastoral leaders who do a great job. So that does, man. I just don't want people running off any,
No,
any
very much
church.
So. It still takes discernment, right? We still have to be discerning.
It takes discernment, and it takes time, because there are cultural differences too,
for sure.
that aren't necessarily easy. And I think we all can sometimes be more considerate about those. And then that's not just for the white church; that can go for Black churches too. So yeah, I think in general, that could be the answer for some people. That could be helpful for some people. And I know some who have done. I know Dr. Charlie Dates. He has some of that at his church. I mean, it's a obviously majority African American church by far, but there are some faces that you see there that I believe came for that reason. So I think it can work.
Yeah, I've heard Charlie Dates say this is like something that you should be doing, and I feel like so many white folks are just never in we don't have to be in a position where we're in the minority in any place that we're ever at. Right. We can be comfortable. And I think you talk about cultural differences. For sure, there are cultural differences. There are cultural differences with Black folks coming into a majority white culture. And yet Black folks have figured out how to operate within that, And so it's so clear to me. So because what the Black church has done, and I imperfectly, I'm going to caveat this imperfectly, but it is held on to a truer sort of Christian tradition throughout history. As you see the white church sort of splintering off, people may be able to see my hands here. They're splitting off. The Black church is sort of running in general that middle ground. We're holding on to a biblical orthodoxy and holding on to some an ability to engage culturally, right? And what many Christians are upset with in the political sphere right now is that they can't find those two things. And I'm like, it's here. You just got to be willing to step into it a little bit, I think.
Yeah. So. As Dr. Esau McCauley says, I would say the primary stream of the Black church has maintained that orthodoxy with a kind of social conscience that that I think has served it well. And that I think a lot of other churches and other traditions can learn from. And as you read at the end of the book, I make it very clear there's a lot that we can learn from others as well, right? So it's not that there's nothing, that we have it all together. And then I'll be honest, there's some streams outside of that mainstream that are way out of orthodoxy and trying to move others with it. So, but yes, that primary stream, which is the focus of this particular book.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be learned from that. I mean, I'm still learning, from that tradition and trying to apply it, because what I don't want to do is what we can't do. And I say this in the book too, is just try to repeat the civil rights movement, different issues, different situation, different dynamics. That's not the point, but there are certain principles that remain and that we need to rediscover.
Very much so. And I think that rings throughout the book, for sure. I have no doubt about that. I think it's very clear. So I appreciated that work. I mean, I'm educating myself currently on the civil rights movement. I'm reading, trying to take in as much as I can. What resources would you direct somebody to? Like, could besides your forthcoming book here that they've already pre-ordered, what other resources would you suggest?
That's a good question. I think there's so many different biographies too. I mean, sometimes you just, and love King, mention King in the book, but there's a lot of other people to learn from, whether it's Nannie Helen Burroughs. Like pick up, there's an excellent or not a biography, but excellent book of her work, Nannie Helen Burroughs, that is just amazing. And when I was introduced to her, it opened up so many other, it exposed many of the lies that we've been talking about today. Fred Shuttlesworth. There's so many. I mean, once you pick up the book, you'll see so many other Orthodox believers and how they went about engaging culture. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yes. Nannie Helen Burroughs. I will put that in the show notes for people to check out, and Fred Shuttlesworth as well.
Yeah. Nannie Helen Burroughs. It was put together by Kalisha B. Graves. It's a documentary portrait of an early civil rights pioneer. Nannie Helen Burroughs will surprise a lot of people in how she addressed things. But it's been an eye opener for me too.
Yeah. It seems like she did not play from your quotations in the book. So
she didn't play. And there was a sense of moral order that people try to say, certain groups don't have or don't care about. And she just destroys all that stuff. A must read. Very good. All
right. Ordering it after this. I got you. I appreciate that, Justin. Good stuff, man. I really do. I enjoyed the book. I appreciated your authenticity with it. So excited to see it hit the shelves.
Thank you.
All right. So what is my first question is, what is the strangest job that you have ever had?
The strangest job? Wow. I don't know that I've had a lot of strange jobs. I haven't had a lot of strange jobs. I think while I was in law school, I was a security guard at at Fisk University, and that surprised people. It wasn't a strange job. I worked with a lot of great people, but it was one that I would see people and they had seen me as a student. They're like, "Wait, what's going on?" So that threw people off a little bit. I'll go with that one.
I love it. It's great. My final question then is, what is one piece of advice you would give to people looking to bring God's kingdom more into their work?
Read the Bible, number one. Really, whether it's through Amos or, the other prophets, you got to know the Bible before you can bring it in, and especially before you go into politics or something like that. To know who you are, you have to know what the word says, and you got to know who you are before you go into those spaces.
Amen. I love it. Justin, thanks so much for making time for me. Thanks for the work, and excited to see what happens next.
All right. God bless you, man.
Thanks so much for hanging out and listening to A Theology of Hustle. Make sure that you like and subscribe, all the things, and follow me at Theology of Hustle on Instagram. My hope is that this podcast just encourages you in your work, whatever that may be. So until next time, get out there and hustle.